Welcome to the Stephen Mansfield Podcast.
Well, welcome to the Stephen Mansfield Podcast. It is wonderful to have you with me. I want to dive right in because history is being made as we speak. Sunday, July 11th, 2021 could go down in history as the date on which a nation began to change. I'm talking about the nation of Cuba, the troubled nation of Cuba. But on July the 11th, on Sunday, July the 11th, 2021, a massive popular uprising began in Cuba, which had as its intent overthrowing, or at least calling for the end of, the communist government that has ruled there for decades. I want to tell you that this got just minor mention in American press. It got minor mention around the world, but something special is happening in Cuba. And for those of us who love Cuba and pay attention to Cuba and believe that it's time for a change in Cuba, this was a historic moment. Let me tell you that on that Sunday, the 11th of July, there was the 62-year-old communist regime was rocked. And for the first time in those more than 60 years, there were popular uprising around the entire nation calling for the end of the communist regime. Now, let me tell you what's fueling this. What's fueling this is that the people have had enough. There are food shortages. There is an oppressive government. There are sections of the country that do without electricity 6 to 8 hours a day. They are isolated. The government of Cuba has conducted itself in such a way that there are embargoes against it. People are hungry. People are without basic goods. And yes, the United States participates in those embargoes because that's what happens. You misbehave as a nation. You threaten as a nation. You engage in insurgency in other countries as a nation. You will deal with the response of people around the world. You will have governments begin to cut you off, isolate you, quarantine you, so to speak, economically. That's what's going on. So for the first time in more than 60 years, there have been massive uprisings in the country. They were so powerful and so numerous that the president of the country actually called for the patriots, so to speak, the pro-communist citizens, to take to the streets and to oppose those who were calling for freedom. It was a dramatic moment. It continues. Pastors are in very much of influence in this uprising. They're being beaten in the streets. They're being arrested. It's quite a moment. And President Biden did speak up. He did say we're with the people. He did come out and say that we're in favor of the end of this tyrannical communist regime. That's good. I think there ought to be more. Let me tell you a little bit about the background of this troubled country. And I'm committed, by the way, in my podcast these days to trying to stay right at 10 minutes. We're busy. We've got a lot going on. I want to help you. And I appreciate my friend Chaz in Nashville for reminding me of this commitment. Let me tell you a little bit about the history of Cuba. As you know, Cuba, maybe you don't know that the name means abundant, and it is a very abundant island, and that's why it's drawn the attention of so many outside forces. So beginning at the time of Christopher Columbus, the late about around the 1500s, late 1400s, you began, of course, to have the Spanish move in to Cuba, it wasn't called Cuba then, but to that island. They took it over. In essence, they began to use that island for their purposes. They imported hundreds of slaves, introduced slavery to that region. And that continued until the Spanish-American War of 1898. So you had centuries of Spanish rule, rather dictatorial, tyrannical Spanish rule, essentially using the people and the resources of the island for their own purposes. not understanding that, as we should, I think, through a grid of faith and through a grid of compassion, understand that every people group, every tongue, every nationality, every tribe has a divine purpose. It has a destiny. It has a purpose of its own. And that purpose is not just to provide resources for the mother country, ship tobacco, ship sugar back to the mother country, and essentially rape the island itself. And yet that's pretty much what went on for hundreds of years from the time of Christopher Columbus. Again, the day associated with him is 1492, all the way 1500s, 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, all the way to 1898, when we finally had the Spanish-American War, and Spain lost Cuba, as it did the Philippines and other properties around the world. The primary force behind this was the U.S. military, but it wasn't the only force. And so independence came in 1902 for Cuba, but then it came under the rule of a lot of dictatorial rulers, and they welcomed syndicates, and they welcomed corruption, and they welcomed, as we all know from the movies and the movie Godfather and the history that we've read, the mafia moved in and carved up Havana and carved up the country, and it was corrupt, and basically this corruption and these criminal syndicates carved up the land, prostituted the people. It was disgusting, and it was actually a somewhat of a righteous claim. I have to be careful about this because I'm as anti-communist as I can be, but somewhat of a desire to overthrow all of this corruption, desire to overthrow this prostituting of the land that led to the communist revolution in the late 1950s, early 1960s under Fidel Castro. Now, I'm certainly not touting that. I'm certainly not saying that was all a good thing. I'm just simply saying that sometimes you have these revolutions and they're trying to overthrow things that in fact are wicked for the people. And that was somewhat the case in the communist revolution, which ended up being horrible for the country. And so for 62 years, you've had this communist rule. Fidel Castro, his brother, his family, others in his circle, largely kept in place and funded by the Soviet Union and then later, to a lesser degree, Russia. So the fact is that there is an island 90 miles off the coast of the United States that is communist in the old school sense. It doesn't work. The people suffer. It's terrible. And now the people are saying enough. Enough with the blackouts and no electricity in entire regions for most of the waking day. Enough with food shortages. In our modern world, food shortages, blackouts, enough with the imprisonments, enough with the oppression, enough with the economic embargoes against us because our leaders can't get along with anybody. Enough. It's time for this communism to end. It's time for this system to end. It's time to have popular elections. It's time to open up with trade with the outside to trade with the outside world. This is a moment. And I want to say strongly that the United States should do more than just say, hey, we are with you. The United States should intervene here. I don't mean militarily now. And the United States also has a history of going into countries and using their resources and their people and their politics and their oil for its own advantage. We shouldn't do that either in this case. But this is a moment at which a negotiation can occur with Russia, at which Cuba could be liberated, at which the Castro regime could be overthrown, removed. It's coming to an end anyway. And at which a popular uprising could be done peacefully. There could be popular elections. And we could see Cuba be a democracy in our generation. This is a moment. This is a moment in which, if the United States and other nations will act wisely, we can see an independent and free Cuba. The time has come. The moment is here. The people are crying out for it. This is meant to be the Cuban moment in history.
Stephen Mansfield is a New York Times best-selling author, a popular speaker, and a frequent faith and culture commentator on Fox and CNN. His groundbreaking books on faith and society include The Faith of George W. Bush, The Search for God in Guinness, Mansfield's Book of Manly Men, and Lincoln's Battle with God. Learn more at stephenmansfield.tv.